Eddie Canestracci here! And yeah, I decided after some hesitation to record this review of the new Rolling Stones album, which I've listened to now 3 whole times without any interruption. Alright, yeah, I gave it a fair shake, so there you go. But I was reluctant. Why was I reluctant, you ask? Well, normally I'm a kind of a positive guy. I try to be anyway. And, I'm not much of a hater. And if people get excited about something, I don't want to rain on their parade. My opinion shouldn't rain on your parade. That's the headline here, is that we shouldn't care what other people think. I don't understand why somebody saying they don't like something that you like gets you angry, like you're rejecting them, like it's personal. It's not personal. You can love this album. You could think this is the greatest Rolling Stones album ever. And that's cool. I'm happy for you. It's great. I think, well, not the album. The album's a piece of shit. But not to you. You think it's great. It's all just different opinions. And if I'm going to be honest, if I'm going to do these videos, they can't all be puff pieces. Like, it's one thing if it's a band that I just don't like at all, and I never liked any of their stuff. Like, I'm not a fan. Like I'm not a fan of Green Day. So I'm not going to talk about how I think a certain Green Day album sucks, because I think they all suck, because I'm not a fan. Nothing against you if you're into them. I'm just saying I'm not going to weigh in on music I'm just not into. That would be a dickhead move, in my opinion. It would be a dickhead move to be criticizing something you're not a fan of. But if it is a band or artist that you are a fan of, well, then I think it's your duty as a YouTuber that makes videos reviewing albums from the bands you love to weigh in. And obviously this is a big release. It's the Rolling Stones' new album, if you want to call it the Rolling Stones. Hey, more on that later. Yes, obviously I'm not a big fan of this album, but the question is, how much of not a fan of this album am I? And that's the big question. Do I think it's the worst Rolling Stones album ever? Well, before I answer that question, gotta have a little bit of suspense. But before I answer that question, I want to establish something in case you're some newbies coming to my channel and this is the first time you've seen me do a Rolling Stones review. Just so you know who's talking here. They're one of my favorite bands of all time. And in fact, I believe it was like my second or third video I ever made was a 2-part, very long, epic video in which I reviewed every Rolling Stones album. I reviewed every album, from the first album to Blue and Lonesome. That was the latest album at the time I did that review. And it was a very detailed review. All you have to do is watch that 2-part video to see how much of a Rolling Stones fan I am. And I will leave a link down below. But I didn't stop there. That's how much of a fan I am. I continued. I made 3 other Rolling Stones videos since then, including a Charlie Watts tribute. Yes, because Charlie Watts was my favorite member of the Rolling Stones, and after he passed away, I did a tribute video for him. That's my favorite of the Rolling Stones videos I've made. I also did a review of the Goat's Head Soup remix, and I praised that. I loved that. Then there was the Tattoo You Deluxe Edition, and I reviewed that as well, because there was a bunch of new tracks that came along with that as well. And I was always gushing. I was always gushing on the Rolling Stones. In fact, back when I did that epic every album review, I said that I didn't think they made a bad album. Not one bad album. Wow, that was very impressive considering the run of the Rolling Stones. I did have a least favorite. Obviously, one of those albums had to be my least favorite, and that album was Steel Wheels. Steel Wheels, I said, was my least favorite Rolling Stones album. And largely because of the production. I just thought it had a very slick and kind of gutless production. You know what's happy now? What's happy now, if an album can be happy, I know it's not a sentient being, but if an album could be happy, Steel Wheels would be thrilled. It would be thrilled this week because it's finally, after all these years, is no longer my least favorite Rolling Stones album. Yeah, good on you, Steel Wheels. You get moved up a notch. In fact, I think you're several notches up because even though you were my least favorite Rolling Stones album, I didn't think you were a bad album. Yeah, I didn't think the Rolling Stones ever recorded a bad album. Until now. Yeah, so there it is. There's the headline. This, in my opinion, again, just my opinion, is the worst album the Rolling Stones ever recorded. Yes, it's horrible. It's a bad album. All right. There's a few moments here that aren't so bad, which we'll talk about, because I am going to do a track-by-track review. But I think it's a bad album, like an actual bona fide bad album. Like, I'm not buying it. Yeah, I'm not buying this album. I've just been listening to it on Spotify. Every other album that I've ever reviewed on this channel, I've bought, because I believe in supporting artists and buying artist music, and I do it all the time. And I've done it for the Rolling Stones up until this release. I've purchased and I own every Rolling Stones album but Hackney Diamonds. Yeah, I mean, we're even talking like UK, US editions. Like, I got the different editions. I got live albums. I even like get all the different compilations so I can get like some obscure B-side. Yeah, I'm that kind of Rolling Stones fan. You know, maybe that's part of the problem. Like, if I was more of a casual Rolling Stones fan, I'd probably like this album more. I'd go even further to say that if I didn't like the Rolling Stones at all, I might love this album. It's a great album for people who don't like the Rolling Stones, or maybe don't even know who the Rolling Stones are. Like, let's say a 13-year-old girl. Yeah, I think this would be a great album for a 13-year-old girl who never heard of the Rolling Stones. There might be 2 tracks she doesn't like on the album, which are the 2 best tracks on the album. But she'd love everything else. I mean, hell, just look at the album cover. It looks like a Miley Cyrus Trapper Keeper. Oh, and speaking of Miley Cyrus, that's the WizKid producer. WizKid, he's like in his 30s, but whatever. To the Rolling Stones, he seems like a kid. Anyway, this producer, Andrew Watt. Yes, the great Andrew Watt. And by great, I mean worst producer of all time. Not a fan of the Watt. Okay, so let's talk about Andrew Watt a bit. He's not the only problem with this album, but he's a big problem with this album. But the biggest problem with the album is that the Rolling Stones enlisted this guy to be the producer of their album. So really, the blame goes to them. I can't blame Andrew Watt for taking a job that's given to him. It's a big job. What are you going to do, turn down the Rolling Stones? I can't blame him when he produced Ozzy Osbourne. Like, Sharon is coming up to him and saying, hey, we're going to pay you to produce this stuff. Of course you got to say yes. You got to take the job. Andrew Watt, he was a guitarist, multi-instrumentalist. That means he can play guitar and knows how to operate a drum machine. And he played with Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus, and he produced albums for them. So yeah, he was a pop producer for teen music, for teenagers that listen to shitty, disposable pop music. The kind of music that Keith Richards himself, in an interview, totally slagged and says he hates and thinks is rubbish. But it's all right to let a guy that does music like that produce your album, because you don't really give a fuck. Because we all know Keith doesn't give a shit about this album. There's like one song he did that he might have gave a shit about. And all the shit that Mick is doing, he does not give a fuck about. It's a paycheck. I actually would go as far to say he's contractually obligated as a shareholder of Rolling Stone Inc. to participate in the promotion of this album in a minimal amount of recording sessions. I'm not entirely sure Keith plays much on this album. I'm sure he's playing a few of the riffs. And Ronnie Wood, likewise, he's contractually obligated to play a certain amount to get a certain piece of the pie. Obviously, he's not getting as much as Mick and Keith, but he's getting a little piece. And no other musician does. Everyone else coming in, and even their drummer, Steve Jordan, because I'm not entirely sure Steve Jordan's actually playing on this. I'm sure he plays live. I'm sure he's a fine drummer, but I'm not convinced that he's actually... I'm not really convinced there's musicians on this album for the most part. I think a lot of it sounds suspiciously AI generated. More on that later. Yeah, so obviously Keith's not really involved in this, whatever. It's just some lame pop album that Mick Jagger did with the Rolling Stones logo. But, he's contractually obligated to go on an interview and go on Jimmy Fallon and act like he had something to do with it, save for a song or two. And then they go and they play the old hits live and everyone's happy. And then in 2 years, if Keith is still alive, and I really hope he's alive, for not just because I love Keith Richards and hope he lives, but I hope he lives so that he can then in a year or two totally slag Andrew Watt and say, yeah, that album was shit. It was a shit album, shit production, shit songs, and yeah, I'm not into it. So yeah, not a fan of this album. Again, if you love it, I think it's great. I know people want to really love the Rolling Stones. I can relate because I really want to love the Rolling Stones too. They're one of my favorite bands of all time. Top 5. They get into my top 5. And this is another thing, just so you know, I'm not an ageist either. Power Up, AC/DC's last album? Whoa, I really love that album, and I think it's their best album they did since For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. So I was blown away by that. And if we're going to talk about the Stones' peers, well, there's Sir Paul McCartney. I gave McCartney 3 another glowing review. To a degree, I guess he was kind of forced in that position because it was the pandemic, and so he had to do just a straight up rootsy kind of album at home. And it was awesome. And I love that album. But even going back to Egypt Station, like, yeah, there was that one really dumb pop song, like I Want to Fuck You, or whatever that song was called. That was embarrassing. But that was only one song. So I forgave him. The rest of the album was actually pretty decent, I thought, for the most part. I loved the song Dominoes. And Paul always was interested in pop music and different trends and different styles. So it just feels more earnest with him when he tries different things. And yeah, maybe it doesn't always work, and maybe he's had some clunkers over the years. But I always feel like Paul McCartney is genuinely interested in what's going on with music and technology, and it doesn't feel as fake as what we have here with Hackney Diamonds. Like, this sounds, for the most part, there's 2 songs that I think are an exception, but for the most part, this sounds like just a totally plastic fake album, and it sounds AI generated. Yeah, I thought that as soon as I heard Angry, the lead-off single, I was not a fan of. Yes, I thought it was the worst Rolling Stones song ever. Yes, and they had a few clunkers here and there, but man, I just hate it. Instantly, there's this fake-sounding, lazy hip-hop beat that comes in and opens the song. Considering that we lost Charlie Watts, one of the greatest drummers ever, something about that instantly rubbed me the wrong way. I understand if you only got a couple tracks of Charlie playing on it, but shouldn't it still be something that kind of sounds like Charlie Watts? Like, even if it's a sample or a beat, like from a machine, shouldn't we try to emulate Charlie swing a little bit, his groove? And that's a big problem I have with this album. Even one of the 2 songs that Charlie plays on doesn't sound right, and I'm going to get more into that later. But this song, I knew it was not Charlie Watts first second I heard it, but I also don't know if it's a Steve Jordan guy. It just doesn't sound like a human being playing drums on this song at all. So, I don't know, maybe Steve Jordan's lays down a line, and then Andrew Watt cuts it and pastes it, and I don't know, maybe he uses Cakewalk. I don't know what he uses. And yeah, a lot of pop music does sound like this nowadays because it's really badly produced. But it's not all badly produced. There are some good producers. Another Andrew. A lot of these Andrews producing these guys these days. Andrew Wyatt. Now, the difference between Andrew Wyatt and Andrew Watt is Andrew Wyatt is actually a good producer. He actually can record things and then mix them and put them in his computer, and they come out sounding good. Like, they don't sound like compressed robotic shit. They sound good. It's slick. Andrew Wyatt's stuff is definitely slick. It's very produced, but it doesn't sound like compressed dog shit coming out of little tiny speakers out of the earbuds of a 13-year-old girl. This isn't even a Mick Jagger solo album, technically. Officially, they're releasing this as a Rolling Stones album. Whoa! The band, the Rolling Stones. You know, like the band that did things like Let It Bleed and Exile on Main Street, Some Girls. Whoa! That band is like one of the greatest bands of all time. So yeah, you don't go to some fucking jerk-off douchebag with dyed blonde hair that jams with Justin Bieber and a bunch of LA reprobates and give him the job to not only produce the new Rolling Stones album, but actually co-write 3 songs on it. Yeah, including the lead-off single. Like, this idea that he's some kind of pop genius. You know, this is a problem. Sometimes young people with dyed hair can convince older people that they're cooler and more with it than they really are. Sharon Osbourne got hoodwinked into thinking this guy was going to make Ozzy hit with the kids. Yeah, he'll do this Post Malone song, and Ozzy's going to be really hit with the kids. Yeah, because the kids are going to be the ones that buy his albums and spend money to go to his tours and all that stuff, because we all know kids love music and spending money on music and have a lot of money because they're kids. Yeah, it's not like they just stream whatever song they like and it's in the background while they're playing video games and they can give a fucking rat's ass about music. No, let's cater to them. Let's cater to them instead of the middle-aged and older people who have money, have disposable income, and have been following these artists for years. Yeah, and we'll spend hundreds of dollars on them. Yeah, don't cater to them. Cater to the fucking dipshit kid that fucking is working at the Dairy Queen that doesn't even fucking know who these bands are and isn't gonna spend fucking jack shit on them. Yeah, but that's just me. That's just me. This is the thing. It's like when an old person tries to not look like an old person and they wear a toupee, or an old woman puts too much makeup on her face. It has the reverse effect. It makes them look older. And this album is like that. This album feels like Mick Jagger is trying to be hip with the kids, like make an album that maybe his wife, who's like would be the age of his like granddaughter, would like. Like maybe this is music she would like while she's like waiting in an airport somewhere or lounging on a beach somewhere in some resort. He's trying to make his wife happy. He's trying to make his young wife happy. And, like she's going to listen to it and go, oh, yes, Mick, it's great. It's great. Whatever. And she doesn't care. She's going to fucking tune it out and then listen to like a Weekend song later because that's what she really likes. So Mick Jagger gets hoodwinked into thinking that Andrew Watt's a good producer. And listen, another one of my favorite artists of all time, Iggy Pop, he fell for this too. Now, I will say this. Iggy Pop's album, Every Loser, is actually not a bad album. It managed to survive Andrew Watt. That's the thing, though. It's not good because of the production. It's good despite its production. It sounds like there wasn't too much he could do to fuck it up because it was essentially Iggy Pop and a few talented musicians got into the studio and they had some good songs and he just had to record it, There wasn't like too much he could mess up with. But he tried because the album sounds shitty. It has a shitty production. In fact, this would be a great album if it wasn't for the production. Like the production's the one thing holding it back and making it just a good album. It's a good, solid Iggy Pop rock album that could have been great if he actually worked with a great producer instead of a shit producer. Now, of course, the Ozzy albums are horrible. They're pieces of shit. But I haven't really liked anything that Ozzy Osbourne has done in decades anyway. So, I didn't think anything about that. But when I heard the Rolling Stones had Andrew Watt, the first thing I thought was, God, they're really slumming it. They're slumming it. Now, like Iggy Pop, he doesn't get a chance to work with bigger producers all the time. Not these days. So, like, if Ozzy Osbourne saying, hey, mate, use my producer, I can kind of get Iggy giving the guy a shot. Why not? But come on, this is the fucking Rolling Stones. I know they did Beggar's Banquet, but they don't have to fucking beg. They don't have to fucking go to fucking Ozzy Osbourne's fucking hand-me-down producer that fucking used to produce Miley Cyrus and fucking Justin Bieber. This is beneath them. The whole fucking album is beneath them. And Angry is a fucking dumb shit pop song. It's just a dumb shit pop song that has some generic Rolling Stonesy sounding riff that's all right. I mean, it's like, it's nothing special. It sounds like maybe Keith did it or maybe AI generated it. Did you ever listen to that AI generated Oasis album? That fake Oasis album? I wasn't impressed by it. It sounded like robot shit to me. And this sounds like robot shit to me. And the lyrics are dumb. God, mixed vocals, so compressed, so auto-tuned. It sounds horrible. It just sounds horrible. I got friends that like this song. I got friends that like this album. Friends I respect. And, we just got different ears. Me, this just sounds like a really shitty, dumb pop song. And I hated that video with the fucking billboards dancing and some young, dumb model dancing around, like, just like hiding their age again. Hey, look at AC/DC, the great AC/DC that would never do a sellout, dumb pop album like this. Their first video was shot in the dark. Shot in the dark with just the fucking old dogs in a fucking room. Yeah, that's all they needed. They didn't need guest stars. They don't need some fucking young douchebag producer. They just fucking got in there, Brendan O'Brien, a great rock producer with some great songs, and they just fucking knock him out. And then their promotional videos show the fucking band playing. Yeah, the old band playing. Even though Angus Young is wearing a schoolboy uniform, he still has far more dignity than Mick Jagger will ever have. All right? He's still fucking not hiding his age. It's like, yeah, I'm an old fucking guy in a schoolboy uniform. And he's been married to the same woman his whole fucking life. He grew old with her. He values the past. They honored his brother, Malcolm Young. That album was dedicated to Malcolm Young. Yeah, just like they honored Bon Scott back in the day with Back in Black. Because these are people with souls. Not saying the Rolling Stones, the remaining Rolling Stones don't have souls. I'm just saying that they might not have souls. Get Close. Oh, horrible. Even worse than Angry. Yeah, it made me immediately nostalgic. I was immediately nostalgic for a time when Angry was the worst Rolling Stones song I ever heard. But no, fucking Get Close was like, hold my beer, Angry. I'm gonna suck even more. Oh my God, yeah, and of course Andrew Watt co-wrote it. They bring a little bit of the Some Girls flange back, or the AI generated that. Like the AI was like, hey, Some Girls moved a lot of units, so let's put a little bit of Some Girls flange on this. But short of that, this fucking song just sounds like a dumb throwaway fucking pop song where Mick just repeats the chorus again and again. He does that a lot on this album. It's infantile and it's beneath a rock and roll elder statesman. It's beneath him. Okay, moving on. Depending on You. Depending on You it's a pop ballad, also co-written by Andrew Watt. I guess it's the best of these three. Don't get me wrong, it's not that good. It sounds a little like a Noel Gallagher solo song, but if Noel did it, it would have better production and better singing. Noel would sing it with a lot of feeling, and I don't think Mick's really capable of singing with feeling anymore. At least, I only hear it on one track. More on that later. But for the most part, nah, it just sounds like a flat version of a kind of average pop ballad, I guess. Okay, moving on. Bite My Head Off. Now, this is one, I had a friend send me this and said, hey, this is a better song. You might like this one. I understand why he thought that. Yeah, I mean, it's got Paul McCartney playing a big fuzzy bass. That's cool. I like Paul McCartney. I love big fuzzy bass lines. And hey, yeah, if there had to be guest stars, Paul's a cool guest star to have because they're peers, and the Beatles and the Stones, you know, they have a history together. So, yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind Sir Paul McCartney coming into the studio, playing a bass line that he literally could write in 2 minutes, which I'm sure he did in the studio, and then they built a whole song around it. Hey, whatever. It's fine. It's not great. Mick's vocals are very try-hard. He was even a little try-hard back when he did those punk songs on Some Girls and Emotional Rescue. So, hey, I would let this track slide. I think it's just kind of an average track. I like the bass breakdown, but it should not be one of the better tracks on this album. And everyone involved, Paul McCartney included, I know are capable of much more. Next, Whole Wide World. Probably the most frustrating song on this album because it kind of starts off kind of good. I kind of like that sneaky, dark, kind of sexy riff that's in there during the verses. It sounds more like Iggy Pop than the Rolling Stones, but hey, I love Iggy Pop, so I don't mind that. It has a little That Some Girls flange. I remember perking up a little bit when this one came on. But then, it hit the chorus. Oh my god, that fucking chorus, which is like Taylor Swift City. Yeah. Except for if it was Taylor Swift, it'd actually be better. Because who wants to hear Mick Jagger, this 80-something-year-old man, singing like Taylor Swift? It's such a candy-ass, fluffy pop chorus. It just does not belong with the sexy riff in the verses. Oh, it's just a horrible cut-and-paste mess. What do you know? Andrew Watt, the Whiz Kid, fucked up another song. Dreamy Skies. This is a song I can imagine Stones fans liking and kind of grasping at this one because it sounds like human beings made it. And it's like, it's just a rootsy country song. It's all right. It's the kind of stuff Ronnie Wood could do in his sleep. Just like that bass line Paul McCartney did. This is the kind of shit Ronnie Wood and Keith could like play without even thinking. And that's what it sounds like they're doing. It's all right. It's not bad. The worst thing about it are the dumbass lyrics. Mick Jagger, he's just singing, oh, he needs to get away from everything and go out to the country. How fucking leisure class of him. God, this is the guy that used to sing stuff like No Expectations. Can't always get what you want. Used to be one of the greatest lyricists of all time. I think one of the most underrated lyricists of all time. This is just privileged, old millionaire rubbish. Mess it up. Now, this one has Charlie Watts actually playing. At least that's what they claim. It sounds like there's a human drummer on it, so it could be Charlie. If there was a finished product when Charlie Watts was alive, it would have been much better than this, because Charlie would not accept a song this shitty going out there with his fucking name attached to it. So it has this half-ass riff. It's kind of jerky sounding guitar work. Doesn't really sound like the Stones, in my opinion. Yeah, it's a really shitty song. Then it gets into this kind of funky thing, and it sounds like a rejected outtake from an earlier album that Andrew Watt took and put in his fucking deflavorizing computer and turned what might have been maybe the clay of a decent song and turned it into a shit song. But then we get to the best song on the album, Live by the Sword. Now this is funny because I did not look at the producing credit when I came to this decision. I instantly heard with Live by the Sword that something was different. It sounded like the Rolling Stones. Charlie Watts drums, and yeah, I knew this was one of the two tracks of Charlie Watts playing, and his drums have that groove. They have the groove of the Rolling Stones. I was like, yeah, now this is more like it. The guitar sounded like the Stones. Even Mick sounded better. Like he sounded like his old scrappy, lively self, and the whole thing didn't sound fucking compressed and put through a fucking computer of soulless death. It sounded like life. It sounded like the Rolling Stones were the Rolling Stones and they were living and jamming. I was like, yeah, this is a good song. Why isn't the whole fucking album like this? And then I looked up and saw this was the sole production work of Don Was. Yes, Don Was, who was the Rolling Stones producer for decades, going back to Voodoo Lounge, and he did a Bigger Bang, and he's been their producer for decades. So obviously, this is like an old track. Probably going back to a Bigger Bang would be my guess. Or maybe when they were doing like a Doom and Gloom, like those sessions. And that was a great song. I love Doom and Gloom. Yeah, Don Was is a good producer, and he was a great producer for the Stones, and he knew what he was doing. He should have produced this whole fucking album. So that right there shows you, in contrast, the difference between a real producer that can capture the spirit of a real band playing and some dipshit that just gets all these different pieces together from various people and then puts it together and lets a fucking AI program do the rest for him. That's the difference. That's the difference between talent and hackdom. Now, okay, so one good song. Now, the lyrics aren't great, by the way. Definitely not Mick's best work, but I like his singing on that song. So I'll let it go. This would have been a good mid-tier song on A Bigger Bang. A mid-tier song on A Bigger Bang is the best song on this album. So think about that. Then we get to Driving Me Too Hard. Oh my God, we're back to Watt-dom. Yeah, Andrew Watt. Oh my God. But he didn't even co-write this song, so they can't entirely blame him on it. It's just a really dumb, stupid, forgettable pop song. Fucking Keith Richards, he had to be dying a little bit inside if he had something to do with this, although I don't think he did. No, what he did have something to do with is easily the second best song on the album, and the only song that kind of survives Andrew Watt's production, and that is Tell Me Straight. It is the token Keith Richards sung song, and as a result, yeah, Keith actually gives a shit a little bit. He has some integrity, all right? He will put his name on an album like this and allow his name to be listed in the personnel, so he doesn't have that much integrity. But he's got a little more than Mick. All right, Tell Me Straight sounds like a human being. It sounds like his guitar playing. It sounds like he's singing. The lyrics are actually subtle and stately, and there's emotion. There's actual emotion in Keith's singing, in his voice. Like, he sounds like he might have some feelings, unlike Mick Jagger. Yes, Keith Richards sounds like he might have a little bit of feelings that maybe 3 a.m. he might wake up and panic and worry about dying or something. Like, he might actually have a little bit of a soul. And that comes through. Tell Me Straight, it's got some atmosphere too. Now, it's not entirely perfect because of Andrew Watt. Andrew Watt is trying to fuck up the song. This is similar to the Iggy Pop album where it's something good there and it's getting through. It's getting past Andrew Watt's shitty production, but still he's trying. Andrew's trying to make it shitty. There's this really dumb, fake sounding drum beat that's way too loud and kind of overstepping the music, and it's stupid. It's like, I wish that dumb robo drum beat was not there. And it's a little too process sounding, the whole thing. But that aside, it survives. It survives Andrew Watt's production, and it's the second best song on the album. So good job, Keith. Moving on to The Sweet Sounds of Heaven. This is another song that some people threw my way after they heard on Facebook that I didn't like Angry. And they said, hey, isn't this better? I mean, Lady Gaga singing on it. So I don't know why they thought I would like it. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this song. Not a fan of the song. It's all right, I guess, compared to some of the other dumb songs, but there's some human beings involved. Stevie Wonder's playing the piano. So yeah, Stevie still has some soul. So that's good. And listen, Lady Gaga's a fine singer. Obviously, she's got good pipes. Some of her earlier fun club music's all right, but I think it's a lot of vocal gymnastics. I've just never really been a big fan. It's like having fucking Whitney Houston suddenly singing on a Rolling Stones album. Imagine that. Imagine if on Voodoo Lounge, suddenly there was like a 7-minute gospel song where Whitney Houston comes in and starts fucking singing. Would you like that? Does that sound good to you? Nothing against Whitney, but do you think that's what should be on a Rolling Stones album? And this hits a bigger problem with this album. I knew it was going to be a shitty album as soon as I saw all the guest stars. That used to always be a tell when a hip-hop artist jumped the shark. When he released the album that was like half guest rappers. It always tells you that the artist is not bringing it all themselves. They're relying on others. They're using crutches. This is a crutch. Mick can't sing a gospel song the way he used to back in the day, so insert Lady Gaga, insert pop diva that will do all the singing and emoting for you, because Nick can't do it anymore. How about just this? Don't do a fucking song that you can't sing, so you don't need to bring in Lady Gaga. Just a thought. just a thought. Blue and Lonesome sounded befitting of a man his age singing soul and blues music. And he knew his limitations, and he didn't need to insert someone else to fucking handle the weight of something he couldn't do. And even as it is, it's just a generic gospel song. They've done songs like this much better in the past. And it's overlong, it's overblown, and I don't like it. I think it's more like the sweet sounds of shit. Moving on. Rolling Stone Blues. Okay, Muddy Waters, the classic song. That's not actually the title of the song, but whatever. It's a classic. It's great. It's obviously the song that inspired them, inspired the title of their band, if you want to call this a band anymore. But I don't know. At this point, it's like an insult. It's an insult to fucking do a song like this at the end of an album like this. Don't act like this gives you some fucking get out jail card, like you're really legit bluesmen. No, you sold out. You sold out, guys. This late in the game, too. This late in the game. Yeah, they had albums where they flirted with pop. They had albums where they flirted with disco and were a little trendy in spots and threw in a little punk rock and what have you, or a little hip hop beat here and there. But they never did a full album of just trendy fucking throwaway pop bullshit, save for 2 songs. Yeah, 2 songs. There's 2 decent songs on this album, and one is sung by Keith Richards and one was produced by another producer. And that's it. And everything else that Andrew Watt did with Mick Jagger and the Boys is garbage, in my opinion. Trash. Yes, it's a trash album. So because of this, I am going to pretend it doesn't exist. It's like Star Wars fans that don't recognize Disney Star Wars. Like, only George Lucas Star Wars is canon. So Blue and Lonesome, to me, is the last Rolling Stones album. I want to bring this back. I want to wrap up by talking about Charlie Watts and his importance, obvious importance to the band. This proves that the Rolling Stones could not do a great album without Charlie Watts. They were able to do several great albums without Brian Jones. They were able to do great albums without Mick Taylor. They proved that Mick and Keith and Charlie, as the core of the band, could keep producing great album after great album after great album. Even though some might call him just the drummer, Charlie Watts, I never thought he was just a drummer. Every time I saw him in interviews, every time I saw pictures of Charlie, anytime I just saw them standing there, like just his body language, I always got a sense that Charlie was kind of behind the scenes. He was the brains of the band. I always had that vibe. I talked about it in my Charlie Watts tribute, which I'm going to leave a link down below. Yeah, check out my Charlie Watts tribute, because the Rolling Stones, as a creative entity, died with Charlie Watts. I'm convinced of that now. They would never do an album this shitty with Charlie Watts. I'm convinced of it, because he would have punched out Mick Jagger. Yeah, he actually did that before. He actually punched out Mick Jagger. And, you know, Keith, obviously, he knows it's shit. He just doesn't care. He just doesn't care. He just wants to do his thing, smoke his, like, medical marijuana, whatever, and listen to some old blues and reggae. He does not care. And Ronnie Wood, hey, he's just been happy to be there for like 50 years now. So they don't care. So Mick Jagger did this really lame pop album with a shit producer, and they called it a Rolling Stones album, and they'll probably play like maybe 1 song from it live for like a month or 2, and then just go back to all the old hits. Then you'll never hear it again. So that's the new album by Andrew Watt and the AI-generated Rolling Stones. Not a fan, but I still love the Rolling Stones of the past, from the first album, the Blue and Lonesome. It's a great streak. In fact, now Steel Wheels never sounded better. I'm gonna crank it up after this. Little Rock in a Hard Place? Yeah, let's get into it. That's a fucking catchy album. Do not accept fake shit. Accept the real Rolling Stones. The real Rolling Stones when Charlie Watts was in the band and they were making real rock and roll music. So anyway, that's my opinion. What do you think? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your opinion. I really do. If you like what I had to say, if you liked this video, hell, even if you hated it, like it, and subscribe to my channel, and check out all the other reviews I did for the real Rolling Stones albums, and especially that Charlie Watts tribute, and you'll see how much I love this band. Once again, I'm Eddie Canestracci, and I am out of here.